My research focuses on Indigenous people in the United States. I'm in the process of finishing a book that will be coming out hopefully in the fall of 2014. It's about the Modoc War, which is California's so-called last Indian War. It was an event of tremendous importance in the late 19th century. But what I really look at is not just this event, but I look at the ways in which memories of this event continue to be circulated and brought up, the way that people continue to remember this moment of tremendous violence in California's past. And in particular, the ways in which remembering something like the Indian Wars is deeply tied to the way that Americans understand their history and their identity as an empire, as a colonial nation, and as a nation fundamentally innocent. And there's this way in which, for example, in the Indian Wars, that settlers are not the aggressors, but settlers were the victims of Indian violence. That it was indigenous criminality that was the cause of conflict, not the encroachment upon sovereign lands, not the exploitation of their labor and of their resources, not their unfair treatment at the hands of settlers and of soldiers, but it was indigenous criminality that was at fault. And this comes really clear in the Modoc War, because while it begins as a small little conflict in the winter of 1872, it escalates in April 1873 with the murder, the so-called murder, of General Edward R.S. Canby, the highest ranking commissioned officer ever to die in an Indian war in the United States history. And the nation is outraged by this. The day afterwards, newspapers flash headlines all around the country that say, "Red Judas, the Indian criminals have murdered our great Civil War hero." And the war is escalated, and the Modoc are rounded up. These Modoc headmen are tried for war crimes, and they are executed. From there, then I talk to them about how is it then remembered over time. And I look at things like the Wild West shows, I look at dime novels and fictional accounts of this event. I look at the ways in which memorials to this conflict are celebrated. And as they're celebrated, they continually go back to reaffirming who were the criminals and who were the victims, who was innocent and who was guilty. And this becomes a way that Americans then can justify these wars of conquest for Native peoples. But it doesn't end there. The Indian Wars of the 19th century provided the basic building blocks that Americans used over and over again in their wars of aggression and empire in the 20th century. So just as the justification for the Modoc War was the death of Canby, when the United States enters World War I, it's the sinking of the Lusitania. When they enter World War II, it's the bombing of Pearl Harbor. When they enter the Vietnam War, it's the Gulf of Tonkin. And when the United States begins its global war on terror, it is the attacks on the World Trade Center. So it's this supposedly unprovoked assault on supposedly innocent American citizens and servicemen that becomes the rationale then for our wars of innocence. And that is the ways in which events like the global war on terror become connected to moments like the colonization and conquest of indigenous peoples in the United States.